Okay, good afternoon. Okay, where do okay, welcome back to the second class of software engineering. Before we talk on a fairly important topic of this course, if you can only remember one topic on this course, then Scrum may be your topic to remember, okay, in this course. Okay, please settle down and please talk outside the room. Do you belong to this class? If yes, stay quiet. Okay. Let's review what we have discussed last week. We talked about that if you become good at SE, software engineering and project management learned in this course, you have a better chance of getting promotion at work. So that's how I try to entice you to have an interest in this course. And remember, the focus is not to memorize. Of course, you need to remember something, but the more important is your ability to apply what you have learned. And we've also learned that perhaps when to study, how to study would affect your result, your performance. So it's not enough to put in hard work, but you have to put in hard work the right way and the right time. Okay. And learning is a lot more than knowledge, as we said on the last slide, is about applying it. But learning or education in some way actually means you are here to change your way of thinking. If your way of thinking, if your attitude don't change, then perhaps you're not learning. Okay, so to learn, you probably have to change your way of thinking. And if you just think that you would just learn some new facts and that's the end, that's all of the learning you're going to do, then you're probably wrong. And there's a very famous author who wrote this book called Understanding the Professional Programmer, Gerard Wingbert. He said, experience doesn't necessarily teach anything. So you may have many students sitting in this class, but some students would learn more than other students. So your experience of sitting in my classroom with your classmates will produce different results. Okay, so experience alone is not enough. You have to try to engage yourself and reflect on it. Okay, engage means you put your mind into something. Okay, you put your heart into something. If you don't have your heart and mind to do something, then of course the outcome would be worse. And if you do not reflect on your experience, then you are not learning. Okay, and we have learned about the various stages of waterfall. Okay, sometimes people call it with a slightly different names, but these are perhaps the most commonly used names. The red one are the stages: requirement stages, design stages, implementation, verification, and maintenance. Waterfall's model is very focused on producing work products, artifacts. That means you produce something. And inside the brackets, I show the person who's usually in charge of this activity. Okay, so for example, business analysts will work on requirements, even though he or she will be talking to the customers. But that's his main responsibility to produce, to carry out requirements activities, which include producing a short problem statement and a long SRS, which stands for Software Requirements Specification, and also the project plan. Project plan basically is a list of activities and the time frame. And the design activities will be performed by architects and systems analysts. Architects responsible for the more high-level thing, perhaps just the major components and how the major components are connected together, then is captured in an architecture document. And the systems analysts would produce the system design document, or sometimes the detailed design document, which shows more details. And of course, the programmers are responsible for the implementation, the coding, okay, and the end result is source code. The testers would do verification to try to find out whether the program works as required. And even though they're testing the programs, they would create some documents called test logs. Logs, like a logbook, it records what testing has been done, when it was done, who did it, and what was the outcome, like whether it's successful or unsuccessful. Okay, and same group of programmers or a different group of programmer, maintenance programmers would do maintenance work, which will result in the source code being enhanced or debugged. So in waterfall stages, all the activities has the characteristic that after you finish this one, after requirements, then you go on to the next stage. You generally don't go back to the requirement stage, and so on. After finishing design, you do the coding, and in the middle of the coding, you seldom go back to revisit the design. And they do a lot of, create lots of work products. They create many documents. So this week, we would look at another method called Scrum. And you are expected to use Scrum for your group project. And Scrum has been getting more popularity in the outside world. So there's a good chance that when you join a company, usually they would do one or the two. They usually do use the waterfall or the Scrum. But since waterfall is quite easy to understand, and so your focus should also be the Scrum, okay? So that you can explain when you're in a job interview, you can explain to the person hiring you what Scrum is, okay? And you should be, after this week, you should be able to explain how Scrum addresses the shortcomings, the weaknesses of waterfall. And then I want you to start applying Scrum on your group project. So let's have a very brief summary of Scrum. In a Scrum, we divide a project into sprints. Sprint, you can think of it as a duration of time. So a sprint may last as short as 1 week or as long as 1 month or anywhere in between. So it depends on the need of the project team, what they think as the best solution to suit their project. So it's usually 1 week or to 1 month. And once you have started the project, you would not change the sprint size. For example, suppose you have decided to finish certain task within this sprint, and at the end of the sprint, you cannot finish it. What do you do? Okay, in waterfall, if at the end of the design phase they cannot finish all the work in the design phase, then they will extend the design phase a few weeks or a few months. But in Scrum, we don't extend. We just end the sprint there, and then we would mark the status of those tasks as incomplete. Okay, so whatever is unfinished, we would do that in the next sprint. Okay, so you want to know that, and that's a very easy way to test your understanding in an exam. But of course, it's a very easy, straightforward question. And in Scrum, we plan detailed activities not far ahead. For example, that's a very big difference with the waterfall. With the waterfall, we may plan, if the project is 1 year long, then we would plan the activities for the 1 year. Okay, but in Scrum, even if the project is going to be 6 months, then Scrum would only plan in detail for the next sprint. So it always do the detailed planning for just one sprint coming. Okay. Requirements are collected from customers within sprint that we're going to build the features. So in waterfall, when we learn about the requirements, the analyst would write down the requirements on a document, and then someone would sign the document and say, oh, this is the requirements, the very detailed requirements that we agree. But Scrum does not have this idea. Scrum does not believe in creating many different documents. It will create the very minimal of documents. So how do they communicate the requirements? Well, the customer, there should be a customer, on-site customer, who will be always available to the development team. So the development team can always walk over to the cubicle of the customer or make a phone call and talk to the customer and say, can we clarify this? And then the customer representative should be available to answer all the questions. And this is how requirements are communicated. So in Scrum or in most agile methods, communication between people are by verbal rather than through documents. So this should reduce the amount of work. Okay. Requirements. So as said, this is the last point. So face-to-face is even better than over the phone. So they try to do that direct communication rather than indirect communication. And if I ask you, do we have any documents? Do we have a project documents for Scrum? Yes, we do. Okay, but it's a fairly simple document. The first document you would create is called product backlog. A product backlog it contains a list of items. Sometimes we call it PBIs, product backlog items. And many of them, majority of them are user stories. We'll see in details what user stories are. But user stories, basically, each user story would describe who is using the software or the system, what task he's trying to do, and why she wants to do it, why she wants to perform the task. So basically, the person, the action, and the benefit of doing that. Okay, these are the majority of the items on the product backlogs are user stories, and few PBIs are developer tasks. So what are developer tasks? Developer tasks are, let's say, creating a database or setting up the server. Those are developers' tasks. But the PBI generally are not that type of tasks. The PBI are written from the user's perspective. It is something that the user wants to use the system for. It's not the task that the developers want to do. So it's written, the items in the product backlog are written from the user's perspective, not from the programmer's perspective. Okay. And well, you can see a glimpse of that here. Okay, these are some user story, but we'll look into that in detail. But you can basically see it is a list there. Okay, there's a list there, and this list will be ordered from the most valuable user story. That means a task that offers the most benefits for the users will appear at the top of the product backlog. And then the least valuable will be at the bottom. So each sprint, we would just take a few items from the top to work on. That's what the developers would do. Okay, so, and let's go on to see this. Okay. And this is one example of a product backlog. In this product backlog, probably the person who wrote this described the system as categorize user stories. These are user stories. For example, as a site member, I want to describe myself on my own page in a semi-structured way. That is, I can fill in predefined fields, but also have room for free text field or two. Okay, so that so they're trying to build a website or a piece of software for someone to use it to do a Scrum project, maybe. So here, there are other ones. As a site member, I can view the profiles of other members. And you can try to recall right here, what is a user stories look like? It has information of who is doing what and why. So here it says who, okay, let's say on a news feature, a site visitor can read the current news on the home page. It only say the who and the what. It doesn't say the benefit. But I guess you can do things in different ways. Okay, so and the status, the product backlog will also show the status of PBIs. Okay, this is going to be hard to read, but I'll read it out for you. Okay, the first column are the IDs, so maybe we give it a number, and the second one is theme or feature. Okay, the third column is the role. Here, moderator, estimator, and user, researcher. So these are different roles for this particular application. I'll read it out. It's quite small. I want to create a new game by entering a name and an optional description so that I can start inviting estimators. Okay, has some remarks, and the priority, it just say required, and then the status some shows done, and some are blank. That means it's not done. So this we've just seen two examples of product backlog. This one shows just a number of user stories. And then the other ones also shows, let's say, ID, and then status and priority. Okay, this is the third example. This should be big enough for you to see. And it has an ID at the user story, which says, who am I and what am I doing? Okay, I'm an unauthorized user. I want to create an account. Okay, let's say, as an authorized user, I want to add a new item so that it appears in the list. So it's adding an item. So it looks like this also looks like some sort of Scrum tool. Okay, and it may has an estimation on the right-hand side in terms of the unit is really up to you. Sometimes people use person day, okay, for this. And priority means which one is more important from the user's perspective. You can see here, everything, the requirements are written as user stories. So by user stories, you can see unauthorized user, and authorized user, and administrator. There are three types of users. So they are not written as the developer. Like you do not see a user story saying that the developer wants to set up the database. Okay, in fact, so you may be thinking, oh, the work has to be done. So what happened? Okay, at a later stage, we would show how to break up a user story, and then maybe one of the tasks is for someone to create a database table, okay? But this type of task is generally not shown in the product backlog, because remember, product backlog is a tool for us to have a very high level communication with the customer, okay? So you have to pay attention, because you will need to, in your group project, you need to create this product backlog. And also, this is how you would prove to people that, oh, I know how to do that. Okay. And here, there are different user story formats, and this is several of them you can see as a role, a user, some kind of user, I want to do something so that I have this benefit. Sometimes people leave out the benefit. Sometimes people say this, in order to receive the benefit as a da-da-da, I want to do this. And here, another format shows the role, when, where, and what, and why. So I guess the number one is probably the most common format people use. Let's see some more user story example. But we said that the product backlog is the first document we create, and its main purpose is to list out all the user stories that customers may want to have for this product. So it gives you a rough idea of what may be included in this project. Okay, so it gives everyone an idea, but it's only a rough idea because these only shows like very rough. For example, this one says, as a user, I want to search for my customers by their first name and last name. So that is one user story. Another one is, as a non-administrative user, I want to modify my own schedules, but not the schedules of other users. For example, maybe an administrative user can modify anyone's schedule, but as a non-admin user, you can only modify your own schedule. As a user closing the application, I want to be prompted to save anything that has changed since the last save so that I can preserve useful work and discard erroneous work. This one, when you use Microsoft Word,